Dr. Lena Carver leaned over her lab bench, the sterile hum of Veritas Pharmaceuticals' research wing wrapping around her like a second skin. The glow of her monitor bathed her face in blue light as she adjusted the molecular model of Nexicure, the drug she'd spent 3 years perfecting. A miracle, they called it, a chronic pain cure that could rewrite lives. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, tweaking formulas, chasing precision. At 32, she was the youngest lead biochemist on the project, and pride pulsed through her with every breakthrough. The clock ticked past 7 p.m., the lab quiet save for the faint whir of ventilation. Most of her colleagues had trickled out, their chatter about weekend plans fading down the hall. Lena stayed, as always, lost in the data. She was about to log off when a sharp murmur cut through the stillness, 2 voices, low and clipped, drifting from the glass-walled executive suite across the floor. She glanced up, catching the silhouettes of suits against the blinds. "Cleaning the data before the board sees it," one said, the words snagging in her mind. The other voice, smoother, replied, "Hargrove's on it. Just keep the outliers buried." Lena frowned, brushing it off as fatigue playing tricks. She stretched, her neck popping, and hit print on her latest report. The printer wheezed to life, spitting out pages, then something else. A single sheet slid into the tray, stark against her neatly formatted charts. She plucked it up, her breath catching at the bold red stamp, "Confidential, destroy after reading." Her eyes skimmed the text. "Neutralize outliers. Secure approval by Q3. No signature, no context, just a cold directive." The paper trembled slightly in her hands. Outliers? Nexicure's trials had been flawless, hadn't they? She'd pored over every data point herself. Yet here was proof someone wanted pieces erased, shredded into oblivion. She glanced back at the executive suite. The lights were off now, the shadows gone. The lab felt suddenly vast, the air too thick. She slipped the memo into her satchel, pulse quickening. It could be nothing, a typo, a misprint. But the words gnawed at her, sharp and insistent, like a splinter under a nail. She shut down her station, the screen's glow winking out, and stepped into the corridor. The hum followed her, louder now, as if the building itself were whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Lena's apartment was a cocoon of dim light and cluttered bookshelves, the memo burning a hole in her satchel as she dropped it onto the kitchen counter. She poured a glass of water, the taps gurgled too loud in the silence, and tried to shake the unease clinging to her like damp cloth. Neutralize outliers. The phrase looped in her mind, a riddle she couldn't unsee. She grabbed her laptop, the memo's edge peeking out as she flipped it open beside her glass. Logging into Veritas's secure database, she pulled up the Nexicure trial data, rows of numbers she'd memorized like a favorite song. Her fingers hesitated, then searched for the Phase 2 results. The screen loaded slowly, each click amplifying the thud in her chest. There, buried in the raw files, were anomalies she hadn't flagged before. Patient 47, chest pain, dismissed as unrelated. Patient 92, irregular heartbeat, marked as pre-existing. Patient 134, cardiac arrest, scrubbed entirely from the summary report. Her throat tightened. These weren't typos, they were people, erased to smooth the curve. She cross-checked the final submission to the FDA. Pristine, polished, no trace of the chaos she'd just unearthed. The water sat untouched, beads of condensation sliding down the glass. She needed answers. The next morning, Lena cornered Dr. Hargrove in his office, the memo folded tightly in her pocket. He was a lean man with a perpetual squint, his desk a fortress of folders and coffee cups. "Something's off with the Nexicure data," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I found side effects, serious ones, missing from the reports." Hargrove leaned back, his smile a practiced crescent. "Data's messy, Lena. You know that. We polish it for the regulators, standard procedure. Keeps the noise out of the signal." His tone was syrupy, like he was soothing a child. "But these aren't noise," she pressed. "Heart failure, scrubbed patients, it's deliberate." He waved a hand, the squint sharpening. "You're overthinking it. Trials are a marathon, not a sprint. Trust the process." He turned to his screen, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist. Lena stood frozen, the memo's weight pressing against her thigh. His words didn't add up, too smooth, too hollow. She left his office, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm of doubts. Back at her desk, she slid the memo out, tracing the red stamp with her fingertip. Destroy after reading. She wouldn't. Not yet. It was a crack in the facade, and she couldn't stop herself from prying it wider. Whatever it revealed, whatever it cost. Lena slumped onto her couch, the memo now a crumpled talisman beside her laptop. The apartment's silence pressed in, broken only by the faint hum of traffic beyond her window. She opened a browser, fingers trembling as she typed Nexecure Trials into the search bar. The results were a sterile parade of press releases. Veritas's glossy promises of relief, peppered with vague praise from doctors she didn't recognize. She dug deeper, chasing links, but hit dead ends. Broken pages, paywalled studies, a trail scrubbed clean. Frustrated, she switched to a medical forum she'd once haunted as a grad student. A buried thread caught her eye. Veritas trial concerns? But the poster's account was deleted, the replies a chorus of skepticism. Conspiracy nonsense. Big Pharma's just a scapegoat. The deeper she scrolled, the colder the room felt. Someone had worked hard to bury this. Her email pinged, jolting her upright. No sender name, just a string of numbers and letters in the address. The subject, keep going. The message was 3 words. They're watching. Check the funding. Her pulse stuttered. She reread it, the cursor blinking like a warning. Funding? Who is this? She hit reply, but the email bounced, account not found. A flicker caught her eye. The kitchen lights dimmed, then surged back. She stood, peering through the blinds. A black sedan idled across the street, exhaust curling into the night air. Its headlights were off, but the engine rumbled, steady and deliberate. She stepped back, breath shallow. Coincidence, she told herself. Just a neighbor. But the memo's red stamp flashed in her mind. Destroy after reading, and Hargrove's oily smile loomed behind it. She grabbed her phone, thumb hovering over Dr. Ellis's number. Her old professor, the one man she trusted to cut through the haze. But the sedan's engine revved, a low growl that sent her heart into her throat. She killed the lights, plunging the apartment into shadow, and watched the car roll forward, slow as a predator stalking prey. It paused beneath a street lamp, then turned the corner and vanished. Lena sank to the floor, clutching the memo. This wasn't just bad data. It was a thread in a tapestry she couldn't yet see, woven tight and guarded by shadows. The email's warning echoed. They're watching. Whoever they were, they knew she'd kept digging. And now, she realized with a chill that sank into her bones, they weren't going to let her stop. Not without a fight. Lena's sneakers crunched on the gravel path leading to Dr. Ellis's office. The university campus a patchwork of autumn leaves and looming brick. She'd barely slept, the sedan's growl haunting her dreams. The memo now a folded secret in her coat pocket. The morning air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it, anything to shake the fog of dread. Dr. Ellis was her lifeline, a gruff old biochemist who'd taught her to question everything. If anyone could make sense of this, it was him. His office door creaked open, revealing a chaos of books and yellowed papers. The man himself hunched over a desk littered with coffee stains. He looked up, gray brows knitting over sharp eyes. "Lena, you look like hell. What's got you spooked?" His voice was gravelly, warm but edged with concern. She slid the memo across the desk, her fingers lingering on its creases. "Found this at Veritas. Nexecure's data, it's rigged. Side effects buried, patients erased. I think they're pushing it through anyway." Her words tumbled out, clipped and urgent. Ellis scanned the page, his jaw tightening. "Neutralize outliers," he muttered, then tossed it down like it burned. "Bastards. I've seen this game before." He leaned back, chair groaning under his weight. "Veritas funds half this damn school, my old lab included. You think it's just data they're cooking? They don't buy silence, Lena. They buy loyalty." Her stomach dropped. The university too? She'd idolized this place, its ivy-clad promise of truth. He nodded, fishing a battered notebook from a drawer. "Last year, they sank millions into our pain research. Strings attached, publish what they like, bury what they don't. I walked away, but most don't. Too scared or too greedy." He tapped the memo. It's a symptom. You want the disease, check the FDA's approval records. Veritas has friends there, deep pockets, deeper influence." Lena's mind raced. The FDA? If Ellis was right, this wasn't just a company cutting corners. It was a system rigged from the ground up. "How do I even start?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He scribbled a website on a scrap of paper and slid it to her. "Public disclosures. Dry as dirt, but the dirt's where the bodies are buried. Start digging." His eyes softened. "And watch your back. They don't play gentle when the stakes are this high." She nodded, the weight of his warning settling in. The web was unraveling, and she was tangled in it now, whether she liked it or not. Lena hunched over her laptop in the dim glow of her apartment. The FDA disclosure site a labyrinth of gray text and endless links. Dr. Ellis's scrap of paper sat beside her, its scrawled URL her only map. The memo rested nearby, a silent goad. She clicked through financial reports, her eyes burning as midnight bled into the early hours. Then she saw it. Veritas had funneled millions into consulting fees for FDA advisors over the past 2 years. Pet projects, conferences, grants, a sleek new research wing littered the records, all tied to officials who'd greenlit Nexicure's fast-track approval. Her breath caught. The numbers weren't subtle. They were a bribe in plain sight. She dug deeper, cross-referencing names. Dr. Margaret Klein, an FDA panel chair, had co-authored Nexicure's pivotal study, her university raking in Veritas cash the same year. Another author, Dr. Paul Renfrew, sat on the approval committee. Conflict of interest didn't even cover it. This was a handshake sealed with dollar signs. Needing air, Lena opened X on her phone, searching Nexicure FDA. The posts were a mixed bag, praise from Pharma shills, buried in a flood of bots, but a few voices cut through. A whistleblower, at TruthRx, claimed Veritas had smeared her after she flagged trial fraud. Her account was now a ghost, last active months ago. Another user, at PillWatch, posted a grainy photo of a Veritas exec golfing with an FDA suit caption. "Who's really approving your meds?" The replies were brutal. Tinfoil hat. "Shut up and take your pills." Her email pinged again. No sender, just that cryptic string of characters. "Follow the money to the press," it read. She stared at it, the sedan's rumble echoing in her memory. Whoever this was, they were a step ahead, dropping breadcrumbs she couldn't ignore. She searched Veritas media funding and hit a wall, PR fluff and dead links. But one article lingered, half-loaded before it crashed. A snippet about Veritas ad buys spiking before Nexicure's hype campaign. The pieces clicked, jagged and ugly. Academia, regulators, now the press. Veritas wasn't just gaming the system. It was the system, a machine oiled with cash and fear. Lena rubbed her temples, the screen's glare searing her vision. She saved the FDA files to a thumb drive, her hands unsteady. This wasn't about one drug anymore. It was about how deep the rot went. And if her tipster was right, the next thread was dangling just out of reach, waiting to pull her further into the dark. Lena stumbled through her apartment door, the thumb drive heavy in her pocket, the night's discoveries buzzing like static in her skull. She'd stayed at the university library too long, chasing FDA threads until the custodian's keys jingled her out. Now, past 2 a.m., the building felt too still, until she flicked on the light. Her breath snagged. Drawers hung open, papers strewn across the floor, her couch cushions slashed. Her laptop gone. She froze, scanning the wreckage. The memo. She lunged for her satchel, relief flooding her as her fingers found its crumpled edge. She'd kept it with her. But the violation sank in, cold and sharp. Someone had been here, tearing through her life. Her gaze darted to the window. The blinds swayed slightly, as if brushed by a retreating hand. The TV blared to life behind her, making her jump. A news anchor's polished voice filled the room. Veritas Pharmaceuticals Nexicure promises relief for millions, with FDA approval expected soon. The timing was too perfect, a taunt in high definition. She muted it, heart hammering, and checked her phone. Nothing from her tipster, just the echo of their last words. Follow the money to the press. The broadcast wasn't coincidence. It was a flex, Veritas waving its reach in her face. She sank onto the ruined couch, clutching the memo. Academia, regulators, now media. Its tentacles coiled everywhere, squeezing truth into silence. Her mind replayed the sedan, the flickering lights. They knew she was digging, and this was their warning shot. Then her phone rang, a blocked number slicing through the quiet. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then answered. "Stop digging, Dr. Carver." The voice was low, mechanical, distorted, like it came from underwater. "You're smart. Keep it that way." The line clicked dead before she could speak. Her hands shook as she set the phone down, the threat sinking into her bones. This wasn't just about Nexicure anymore. It was personal. They'd trashed her home, stolen her work, and now they were breathing down her neck. But the fear ignited something else, a stubborn, reckless spark. She grabbed her coat, the thumb drive, the memo, everything she had left, and slipped out, locking the door behind her. The street was empty, but the shadows felt alive, watching. She didn't know where she was going, Ellis, maybe, or somewhere to hide, but she couldn't stop now. The voice had meant to scare her silent. Instead, it lit a fuse. Whatever Veritas was hiding, she'd drag it into the light, or burn trying. Lena's boots echoed on the cracked pavement of a rundown neighborhood, the pre-dawn haze cloaking her as she approached a squat brick building. The thumb drive and memo weighed down her coat, her apartment's wreckage still raw in her mind. She needed someone who'd fought Veritas and lived, Mia Torres, a reporter whose byline she'd found in an old X thread. Mia had once called out Veritas's trial fraud, only to vanish from the headlines. If anyone knew how they controlled the narrative, it was her. The buzzer rasped and a voice crackled through. "Who's this?" Rough, guarded, like a woman who'd learned to expect trouble. "Lena Carver. I worked at Veritas. I've got proof they're burying Nexicure's risks. I need your help." Silence stretched, then the door clicked open. Inside, Mia's office was a cave of chaos. Piles of notebooks, a flickering desk lamp, walls plastered with clippings. She stood by a coffee maker, wiry frame tense, dark eyes sizing Lena up. Her hair was a mess of curls, her jaw set like she'd bitten through steel. "You're the scientist who won't quit," she said, pouring a mug. "Heard whispers. Didn't think you'd show up at my door." Lena slid the memo across the desk. "They trashed my place last night. Threatened me. This is bigger than bad data. FDA's in their pocket, and I think the press is too." Mia skimmed the memo, her lips thinning. "Yeah, they own the narrative. I wrote a piece 2 years back, Veritas fudging trials, payoffs to silence families. My editor spiked it after they threatened to yank a multimillion-dollar ad deal. Station went from watchdog to lapdog overnight." She dug through a drawer, pulling out a creased email printout. "This came from a mole. Veritas paid an editor at a top medical journal to kill a Nexicure study. Fatal side effects buried deep." Lena's pulse quickened. "They're rolling it out next week. Millions could die if we don't stop them." Mia handed her the email, her gaze hard. "You're playing with fire, Carver. They don't just sue, they ruin. I've got scars to prove it." She paused, then smirked faintly. "But I'm in. Been waiting for a shot at these bastards." The air between them crackled, two women, battered but unbowed, staring down a Goliath. Lena nodded, gripping the email. The mask was slipping, and Mia was her way through the cracks. Lena sat cross-legged on Mia's threadbare rug, her laptop balanced on a stack of old newspapers. The journalist's office smelled of stale coffee and ink, a sanctuary of defiance amid the storm. Mia had handed her a USB stick with Dr. Ellis's university credentials. Hacked from an old system, she'd said with a shrug. And now Lena was in, navigating the back end of a prestigious medical journal's database. Her fingers flew, guided by Mia's leaked email, searching for the buried Nexicure study. The screen flickered, then loaded a draft titled Cardiovascular Risks of Nexicure, a Phase 2 analysis. Lena's breath hitched. There it was, raw data, unfiltered. 1 in 50 patients suffered fatal arrhythmias, heart rhythms spiraling into chaos. Footnotes detailed autopsies, frantic ER visits, evidence Veritas had smothered. She scrolled to the published version, a sanitized fairy tale, side effects reduced to mild anomalies, conclusions rewritten to glow with praise. "Son of a bitch," Mia muttered, peering over her shoulder. "They didn't just bury it. They rewrote the damn ending." Lena's stomach churned. This was submitted 6 months ago. The journal sat on it until Veritas paid them off. "Look." She pointed to an internal note flagged in the draft. "Hold per sponsor request. Revised copy approved 3/12." The payout Mia's mole had flagged, hundreds of thousands to the journal's parent company, had turned science into a puppet show. Her phone buzzed, screen lighting up with another anonymous email. She opened it, Mia leaning in. "They're rolling it out next week. You're out of time." No signature, just the same cryptic string of characters. Lena's chest tightened. This tipster knew too much, saw too far. "Next week," she whispered. "That's days away." Mia paced, fists clenched. FDA's already rubber-stamped it. If this hits shelves, people die, and Veritas spins it as unforeseen complications. We need this out there now. Lena saved the study to her thumb drive, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't just corruption, it was a death sentence signed and sealed by men in suits. She met Mia's gaze, resolve hardening. "We've got the memo, the FDA payoffs, now this. It's enough to blow it open, if we can get it out." Mia nodded, but her eyes flickered with something darker. "They'll come for us. Hard. You ready for that?" Lena swallowed, the trashed apartment flashing in her mind, the distorted voice on her phone. "I don't have a choice. Neither do they, not anymore." The clock was ticking, and the evidence in her hands was a live wire, sparking with the power to burn Veritas down, or consume her first. Lena clutched the thumb drive as she and Mia slipped out of the journalist's building, the pre-dawn streets cloaked in a gray mist that swallowed sound. The study's data burned in her mind, 1 in 50, a lethal lottery, and the tipster's warning rang like an alarm. You're out of time. They had to get to Mia's news contact, a rogue editor willing to run the story, but the air felt thick with unseen eyes. Footsteps echoed behind them, sharp and deliberate. Lena glanced back, a figure in a dark coat, face obscured, moving too fast to be random. "Mia," she hissed, nudging her. The journalist's head snapped around, and she cursed under her breath. "Veritas Security. Run." Mia grabbed Lena's arm, pulling her into a sprint down the alley. The damp pavement slapped under their feet, breaths fogging in the chill. Lena's coat flapped, the thumb drive a hot coal in her pocket. Headlights flared at the alley's end. A black SUV screeched into view, cutting them off. "Left," Mia barked, veering toward a side street. Lena's lungs burned as they darted past overflowing bins, the roar of an engine closing in. Tires squealed, and the SUV swerved, its side mirror clipping a dumpster with a metallic crunch. She risked a look, 2 men now, one behind, one in the vehicle, relentless as hounds. The street opened into a deserted lot, chain link rattling as Mia shoved Lena toward a gap. "Go!" she yelled, but the SUV fishtailed around the corner, its grille bearing down. Lena dove aside, rolling into wet gravel as the vehicle skidded, missing her by inches. Pain flared in her shoulder, but she scrambled up, the thumb drive still secure. Mia yanked her behind a rusted car shell, both panting. Headlights swept the lot, hunting. "They're not playing," Mia whispered, voice tight. "That studies their kill switch." Lena nodded, adrenaline sharpening her focus. "We get it to your guy, or this was for nothing." The SUV circled, its driver shouting into a radio. She spotted a storm drain across the lot. Cover, maybe escape. "There," she pointed, and they bolted, ducking low. A horn blared, the vehicle charging again. Lena's legs screamed as she dove for the drain, Mia beside her, tumbling into the shadows. The SUV slammed to a stop, too wide to follow. Footsteps pounded closer, then faded, hesitation or a trap. Breathing hard, Lena met Mia's gaze. "They'll come for us both," Mia said, echoing her earlier warning. "Let them try," Lena rasped, clutching the evidence. The chase wasn't over, but she'd made it this far, and she'd be damned if Veritas silenced her now. Lena crouched in the cluttered back room of Mia's safe house, a dingy apartment above a pawn shop, its walls stained with years of defiance. The storm drain escape had bought them hours, not days, and the thumb drive's weight in her pocket felt like a ticking bomb. Mia paced, her phone pressed to her ear, negotiating with her rogue editor. The Nexecure study, the memo, the FDA payoffs. They had it all, but the system was a fortress, its gates greased by Veritas's influence. Mia hung up, her jaw tight. "He'll run it, but the big outlets won't touch us. Veritas has them locked down. We need to go straight to the people." She tapped her laptop, pulling up X. "Leak it here. Raw, unfiltered. Let the crowd tear it apart." Lena hesitated, the trashed apartment and the SUV's growl flashing in her mind. "They'll bury it with bots, spin it as lies. We need more than data, we need a voice." She pulled out her phone, hands steady despite the exhaustion clawing at her. "I'll record it. Everything, academia, regulators, press, journals. How Veritas owns them. If I go public, they can't erase me without proving me right." Mia's eyes narrowed, then softened with a grim respect. "That's a hell of a gamble, Carver. Your career's ash either way." "It's already gone," Lena said, voice firm. "This isn't about me anymore." She glanced at the thumb drive. "It's about the millions they'll kill if we don't move." Mia nodded, then grabbed a burner phone. "I'll call Ellis, get him to rally some old-timers, vouch for the data. Credibility's our shield." She dialed, her voice low as she briefed him. Lena set up her phone on a stack of books, framing herself against the peeling wallpaper. The red record button pulsed like a heartbeat. She took a breath, then spoke. "My name's Dr. Lena Carver. I worked at Veritas Pharmaceuticals. Nexicure's a lie, a drug that kills, pushed by a company that's bought the FDA, silenced journals, and gagged the press. I've got proof. They've threatened me, trashed my life, but I won't stop. This is bigger than one pill. It's a system strangling the truth." She held up the memo, the study's damning page, her voice rising. "They can't hide this anymore." She stopped the recording, her hands trembling with the weight of what she'd done. Mia smirked faintly. That's a Molotov cocktail, Doc. Ready to light the match. Lena nodded, the spark in her chest flaring. It was a long shot, but it was theirs, and she'd throw it with everything she had left. Lena's thumb hovered over the upload button, the safe house's flickering bulb casting shadows across Mia's laptop. The video file stared back at her, 5 minutes of raw truth, her voice steady but her eyes wild with conviction. Mia leaned over her shoulder, breath sharp. Once this hits X, there's no undoing it. You sure? Do it, Lena said, and Mia clicked. The upload bar crawled, then blinked green. Within seconds, the post rippled. Retweets ticking up, comments flooding in. Holy shit, is this real? Veritas is poison. Big Pharma's done. Dr. Ellis's name popped up, his gruff endorsement pinned. I've seen the data. She's right. A handful of his old colleagues followed, their posts jagged with outrage. Lena's phone buzzed as the video went viral, X erupting into a storm of hashtags. Hashtag Nexecure scam. Hashtag Veritas lies. Grainy screenshots of the memo and study spread like wildfire, dissected by strangers with fury and precision. Protests sparked outside Veritas's glass tower, chants audible through shaky live streams. She watched, heart pounding, as the facade she'd cracked began to shatter. Then the counterpunch landed. Veritas's official account fired back. Dr. Lena Carver is a disgruntled former employee spreading baseless lies. Nexecure is safe, approved, and vital. A slick PR video followed, smiling patients, soothing narration, drowning out the noise with polished denial. Bots swarmed X, parroting hoax and conspiracy, while a news ticker flashed. FDA delays Nexecure launch pending review. A small win, but Veritas wasn't buckling. It was doubling down. Mia snorted, scrolling the backlash. They're smearing you hard. Expected, but damn, they're fast. She switched to a burner laptop, tracking the chaos. Public split. Half want blood, half think you're unhinged. Ellis's crew is holding the line, though. Lena's throat tightened as she saw her name trending. Hero to some, villain to others. Her inbox flooded with threats. You're dead, liar. Enjoy your last days. She muted it, focusing on the protests. Hundreds now, signs scrawled with no more lies. The system was trembling, but not broken. A knock rattled the door, sharp and insistent. Mia killed the lights, motioning Lena to the back. Cops? Veritas goons? She whispered, peering through a crack in the blinds. A delivery van idled outside, unmarked, its driver too still. Time to move, Lena said, grabbing the thumb drive in her coat. The leak had lit the fuse, and the blast was shaking the world. But Veritas wasn't done swinging. They slipped out a rear window, the night swallowing them as sirens wailed in the distance. The fight was on, and retreat wasn't an option. Lena pressed her back against the cold wall of a derelict warehouse, the safe house abandoned in their frantic escape. Mia crouched beside her, breath fogging in the damp air as they watched the street through a shattered window. The unmarked van had trailed them for blocks before peeling off, but the sirens still howled, a distant menace. The thumb drive dug into Lena's palm, its edges sharp against her skin. Her only weapon now, and it was costing her everything. Her phone, on silent, lit up with a news alert. Veritas Pharmaceuticals sues Dr. Lena Carver for defamation, seeks $50 million. The smear campaign had teeth. Articles painted her as a rogue scientist, unstable, a fraud. Dr. Hargrove's face flashed on a clip, his squinting smile smug as he testified. She falsified data to sabotage us. Sad, really. Lena's stomach twisted. The man who'd dismissed her concerns now wielded her career's ashes like a trophy. Mia scrolled X on her burner, muttering updates. Protests are growing, thousands at Veritas HQ. FDA's waffling, but the bots are relentless. You're a lightning rod, Carver. She paused, then softer. You okay? Lena didn't answer right away. Her life, her lab, her reputation, her quiet pride was rubble. Blacklisted from science, hunted by suits and shadows, she felt the weight of every choice. I had to, she said finally, voice low. They'd have rolled it out. People would have died. Her phone buzzed again, a blocked number. She answered, wary. A frail voice rasped through. Dr. Carver? It's Ellen, trial patient 92. My heart, they hit it. My daughter's safe because of you. A cough then. Thank you. The call dropped, leaving Lena staring at the screen, tears prickling her eyes. One life. It wasn't millions, but it was real. Mia squeezed her shoulder. That's why we're still breathing. Hold on to it. Outside, a helicopter thrummed overhead, its spotlight slicing the night. They ducked lower, the warehouse's shadows their fragile shield. Lena wiped her face, resolve hardening over the ache. The lawsuit, the lies, the threats, they were Veritas's fists, pounding to break her. But Ellen's voice echoed louder. She pulled the thumb drive free, its data a lifeline to the truth. They can take everything, she said, meeting Mia's gaze. I'll still fight. The chopper's roar faded, but the war wasn't over. Lena's world was in tatters, her name a battlefield, yet that spark, stubborn, reckless, burned brighter. She'd paid the cost, and she'd keep paying, because stopping now would mean they'd won. And she'd never let them win. Lena sat rigid in the courtroom's wooden chair, the air thick with murmurs and the stale scent of polished oak. The defamation suit loomed like a guillotine. Veritas's $50 million claim, a blade aimed at her neck. Her thrift store blazer itched, a far cry from the lab coats she'd once worn. But her eyes burned with the same fire that had ignited the leak. Across the room, Veritas's lawyers strutted in tailored suits, their smirks sharp as scalpels. The gallery buzzed, protesters, reporters, a few grim-faced former colleagues, watching her fate unfold. Mia sat beside her, scribbling notes, her article now a lifeline in the chaos. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, banged her gavel, silencing the hum. Veritas's lead counsel rose, voice oily and precise. Dr. Lena Carver fabricated lies to defame a company saving lives. Her evidence, doctored data, stolen files, is a tantrum from a failed scientist. He waved a hand at Lena, dismissing her like dust. Her lawyer, a scrappy public defender named Torres, no relation to Mia, stood his tie askew. The evidence is real, Your Honor. Trial data suppressed, FDA payoffs, journal bribes, Veritas hit a killer drug. Dr. Carver exposed it at great cost. He slid the memo and study across the table, their pages worn but damning. The gallery stirred as Dr. Ellis took the stand, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. I've seen Veritas's playbook. Fund the research, gag the results. I taught Lena to chase truth, and she did. Their money's corrupted academia for years. His testimony cracked the polished facade, jurors leaning forward, but Veritas's team countered with a parade of paid experts, each parroting Nexecure's safety like a hymn. Then a ripple, a juror, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, slipped a note to the bailiff mid-recess. Whispers spread as the judge reconvened, her frown deepening. Counsel approach. Minutes later, she addressed the room. A juror reports an attempt by Veritas to offer a bribe, $10,000 to sway the verdict. This is under investigation. Gasps erupted, cameras flashing. Lena's pulse spiked. Ironic justice, Veritas tripping over its own greed. Their lawyers blustered, denying it, but the damage landed. Public opinion, already teetering from Mia's article and the leaked study, tilted further. The trial wasn't over, but the mask was off. Veritas's desperation laid bare. Lena met Mia's gaze, a flicker of hope cutting through the exhaustion. The truth was fragile, but it was fighting, and so was she. Lena stood on the courthouse steps, the late afternoon sun harsh against the chaos of flashing cameras and shouted questions. The judge's ruling still echoed. Veritas had settled. Nexecure was off the market, and a federal probe loomed over the executives like a storm cloud. The defamation suit collapsed, but the victory felt hollow, her name a lightning rod in the headlines. Mia's article had dropped that morning, a sledgehammer of truth. FDA bribes, journal fraud, the buried study, splashed across every screen and paper willing to print it. X was a battlefield. Hashtag Lena Carver hero clashed with hashtag Veritas victim. The public split between rage and disbelief. Protests swelled outside Veritas's headquarters, a sea of voices chanting "No more lies," while bots in suits spun denials. Misunderstanding, overblown. The FDA, cornered by the leaked data and public fury, issued a statement. Nexecure's approval was under review. A delay that saved lives but dodged accountability. Lena's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Ellis. You cracked the dam. Proud. She managed a faint smile, but the cost gnawed at her. Blacklisted from science, her career was ash. Labs wouldn't touch her. Journals branded her a pariah. Veritas's lawyers had slithered away. No jail time yet, just scrutiny and fines they'd shrug off like lint. The system bent, but it didn't break. Mia emerged beside her, notebook in hand. Settlement's a start. Execs are sweating, stocks tanking. You've got a voice now, Carver. Use it. She handed Lena a cheap laptop, a lifeline to the world she'd torched her old life to reach. That night, hiding in a borrowed room, Lena started a blog, the Pharma Files. First post, How They Own Us, the playbook, laid bare the gears she'd seen grind. Funded research, greased regulators, paid press, censored journals. Readers flooded in, comments piling up. Keep going, you're not alone. Veritas fired back, labeling her a persistent threat in a leaked memo that only fueled the fire. Her inbox brimmed with hate and hope. A mother wrote, "My son's alive because of you." Lena traced the words, the ache in her chest easing just enough to breathe. The fallout wasn't justice, not fully. Too many suits still walked free, too many strings untugged. But it was a wound deep and public on Big Pharma's hide. She shut the laptop, staring at the cracked ceiling. Vindication tasted like ash and steel, a fragile win against a beast that wouldn't die. But she'd struck the blow, and the echoes were hers to wield. Lena walked past the husk of Veritas's headquarters a year later, its glass facade dulled by neglect, a for lease sign plastered across the entrance. The March wind tugged at her scarf, the date, March 15th, 2026, marking a quiet anniversary of her war. Nexecure was dead, buried by the federal probe that followed the trial, and Veritas had shrunk, a wounded giant limping through lawsuits and audits. The building stood as a monument to distrust, its silence louder than the protests that had once ringed it. She met Mia at a corner cafe, the journalist's curls tamed by a knit cap, her eyes still sharp with fight. Over steaming mugs, they traded war stories. Mia's exposé had won awards, though she dodged threats to claim them. Lena's blog, The Pharma Files, had grown into a beacon, thousands reading her dissections of Big Pharma's machinations. "You're a ghost they can't catch," Mia said, smirking. "Keeps 'em up at night." Lena sipped her coffee, the warmth a balm against the ache that never left. The victory was Pyrrhic, her name cleared in court, but blacklisted in labs, her old life a memory. She'd saved lives, Ellen's daughter among them, yet the system churned on. New drugs flickered in headlines, their trials glossy with the same polish she'd once trusted. Veritas's roots, though scorched, dug deep, sprouting fresh lies in boardrooms she couldn't reach. "You think we changed anything?" she asked, voice low. Mia leaned back, gaze distant. "We cracked the glass. People see the cracks now, some at least. That's not nothing." She tapped her mug. "But they're not done. Neither are we." Lena nodded, the weight of that truth settling in. Her blog posts kept coming, each a flare in the dark, lighting corners of corruption. Readers sent tips, stories of rigged studies and silenced voices, a network of whispers she nurtured. She wasn't a scientist anymore, not in title, but a sentinel, guarding what truth she could wrest free. They parted with a quiet nod, the city humming around them. Lena paused at the curb, glancing back at Veritas's empty shell. The dawn was hers, a fragile, hard-won light, but the shadows lingered, vast and patient. She pulled her coat tighter, the wind carrying a faint echo of her own words from that first video. They can't hide this anymore. Maybe not. But as she walked away, a final thought hooked her, sharp and inevitable. The next pill's already in the pipeline.